Oh my goodness gracious. It is Thursday night. It is time for me to turn up my headphone volumes a little bit. There we go. There we are. Time for a tribute to the Godfather, Joe Anthony. What a better way to start out an evening. One of Joe's favorites to play, Jumbo, the Godfather. Hey, it's Schlepp tonight with you. It's going to be a great night of rock and roll. I've got some really cool testimonials from anywhere from DJs to rockers that have come through San Antonio. And sitting with me in the studio here this evening is, all I can say is really, it's the niece, Janice Hennefeld. How are you?
Hi, Bruce. How you doing?
Pull that microphone there right towards you.
Hi, Bruce. How you doing?
Even closer yet.
Yay, right there.
There we go. Are you coming through there?
Yes, I think so.
You think so? I'm not hearing anything here. Let's go to this one. Any better?
Okay.
With your thing here in just a minute, but I'll get you on there. So what we're going to do is play a whole bunch of good things. So I wanted to make sure everything was working right. Of course, when you're with hold on. And then the phone too. So when Joe was in the studio, there was always mishaps and mayhem. And it's just like, we're just going to follow suit here with it. So I've got the first thing coming up. I was very lucky to get a hold of quite a few voices from the past. and I'm going to let them tell you, for the most part, who they are, and see what you might remember from these guys. Here's one in particular.
Hey, Rock Vault Rockers, it's Debbie Alcacer. You may remember me as the Electric Lady from back in my 99.5 Kiss days in San Antonio, where I had the pleasure, the honor of working with one of the most influential rock jocks in San Antonio, Joe Anthony, the Godfather, the guy who introduced us to Killer Dwarfs, Budgie, Rush, Triumph, that whole Canada connection, the guy who championed local music, local artists, a guy who was also a heck of a restaurateur. The Villa Italia, that was the go-to place for us rockers to enjoy a great meal, drink some wine, chat with Joe about music. That was his love, right after his mama. It was all about music for Joe. A guy who I was happy to call my friend, just to be in his presence and hear all his great rock stories. Well, it just made you smile. So, on this anniversary day of his passing, let's remember a San Antonio radio icon. Let's raise a glass in thanks to Joe Anthony, the Godfather of rock and roll. Woot? Yeah! Now let's jam out on some Flash Out.
you go. Loudness. That's good stuff. And I think you're on now, aren't you?
Am I on?
I think so. Let's.
All right. Yeah, there you go. Can you hear me now?
Can you hear me now?
Anyway, thank you for having me, Bruce. This is very interesting. I like this setup here.
Well, you're quite welcome, and I'm glad you were able to make it,
Yes.
and that the rain kind of held out for you,
Yes.
and that you had safe travels.
Yes.
So it's been a while since you've been in a studio, like forever. And you were in Joe's studio, or at least were you ever in the studio with him?
No.
But you talked to him on the phone and got to introduce the song.
He let me introduce Def Leppard, Let's Get Rock. I just happened to be at home, and I called him up. I said, hey, Joe, this is your niece, Janice. And he's like, hey, what's going on? And I said, hey, could you play Def Leppard for me? Let's Get Rock. And he says, well, why don't you introduce it? And, of course, right back then, he was on 96 Rock. That's right before he got sick. And other than that, the memory was of, of course, he lived with his mother and around the corner from my grandmother. Well, they're both my grandmothers, but
right.
I used to love walking over there. And, I'd, knock at the door, and, his mother would come, Georgina. Always call her Georgina. And she always says, hey, you want to go to Mr. Pizza and have some Pepsi Cola? And, so basically I was pretty young, very young then. But I started going to a lot of concerts and stuff when I was about 17, 18, in the 70s, late 70s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there you go. That was good memories for back then. So we're going to be listening to a bunch of good memories. Speaking of, we got April Wine, some Canadian rock and roll. And I remember this tune. It's the first thing I can remember was always like, is there a fire somewhere? Rock and roll, my friends.
Come on, everyone, the bells ringing and echoing over the land. I can feel the emotion and sadness that now is within. The city stands so tall, but it's imprisoned behind the wall. One day it must fall. Over and over I ask myself, is this a dream? I can hardly imagine the sadness the city has seen. There will come a day when its chains will fall away. I can feel sadness, I can feel joy. Between the two, I'm torn. Day by day, night
Yes, indeed. Man, you know what? You remember it. That's Lone Star. The Bells of Berlin. Joe was a big fan of that song. I remember hearing that thing all the time. Very, very cool indeed. I hope you're enjoying the evening so far. We've got lots of great music, lots of talk ahead. I don't know how much talk Janice is going to get in because for some reason the gremlins have hit the other channels of this board. So we'll figure out something here. She broke it. But we're taking, I've got so many requests that came through during the day. It's almost impossible to get everything in. But we're going to try to do the best we can. And I think everything that we do tonight, I'm going to be very positive on this, that you're going to like them no matter what. So, testimonial-wise, I guess you guys know that, or at least San Antonio-wise, that Operation Mindcrime is coming to the Rock Box next Sunday, the 22nd. That's the original, Queensryche vocalist Jeff Tate will be there. Well, I was very lucky to be able to do an interview with him on the phone today. And just by chance, I asked him, I said, hey, did you have any doings with Joe Anthony? And he proceeded to rattle off right into conversation. So instead of waiting for the interview to listen to next week prior to the show, you can hear his excerpt that I took out this afternoon about a little bit about Joe. For the godfather of rock, Joe Anthony, from the old 99.5 Kiss days here in San Antonio. Did you ever meet Joe?
Oh, yeah. Joe was instrumental, actually. And he was one of the, if not the first, one of the first few people to play Queensryche live on the air.
Okay.
Yeah. And that was in 1980, I'm going to say 82.
Okay.
I guess it is.
82, 83, somewhere thereabouts, yeah.
In fact, when he played it, we heard about it, of course, and, everybody was we were all very excited about the fact that we got on the air in San Antonio, Texas, and wasn't that great and amazing. And so perhaps a year later, we got asked to tour with Quiet Riot on their Mental Health album tour. And we played San Antonio, Texas for the first time. And we walked out there in front of, I think there was like 10,000 people at the San Antonio Coliseum. Mm. And the crowd just went crazy because they were familiar with our music.
Good.
They'd heard us. They'd been listening to us from Joe Anthony, and he'd been sort of blowing the trumpet in our favor, for a year. So by the time we got there, we got a wonderful reception, and it was very surprising and humbling, that many people knew who we were, because we were just starting out. It was our first tour.
So what was one of his favorite, and I probably want to play it tonight, what was one of his favorite songs y'all's early days to play the crap out of?
The Reich.
Okay, that's
the one he played, yeah.
Man. Okay, well that's going in the thing for this evening. So I was hoping I would get some kind of tidbit of information from you and hope that y'all did meet, and that's fantastic. I appreciate that.
Yeah, actually he came up to me at the show, and this was before we went on, and he was in the backstage area saying hi to everybody. He was quite a personality.
Yes.
Very just very confident, very forthright. Hey, I'm Joe Anthony. How are you? Joe Anthony, you're the guy that's playing our song. Yeah. I really like that song. I can't believe you could hit those notes. Can you sing that right now for me? Man, I belted it out.
Yeah. Made his day.
Right there in the hallway. Yeah.
That is sweet. Well, I appreciate that, man, and I'm gonna put that on the show for tonight. Okay. All right, now I think the old man here has figured out what was going on. Are you here, Janice?
Yes, I am.
Oh, see?
Oh, there I am.
See, it's all a thing about phantom power. And if the switch is not flipped, then it just causes you issues.
Yes.
But here we are. So my guest now in the studio, who was a while ago, that was kind of just enjoying herself here, is the niece of Joe Anthony, one of the nieces, Janice Hennefeld. So welcome once again, officially.
Hi, Bruce. Thanks for having me.
Man, I tell you what, and it's been this ride so far has been so much fun, and a lot of people do a lot of things with the Joe Anthony thing.
Yeah.
But I felt, I said, I was getting these little snippets and these little voice things and all sort of stuff, and we're like, you know what, I'm going to cover my butt, and I'm gonna at least let you know what's going on, and just ask permission to see if I could do that. They're either going to say no, or it's like, good, yeah, keep the thing going, and thank you for going with the latter of the two. You've had a lot of great memories with Uncle Joe.
Yes, I have. I was a very, very little girl, and I had two grandmothers. One, of course, was Joe's mother, Georgina, and my mother's mother. They lived a block away. So, of course, as a child, I would walk back and forth to the house and stuff, and I'll never forget, I was so tiny, and of course, that was when you can walk around being safe.
Oh, you could then,
yeah.
I'm sure.
And it was good old Snake Hill, back gates of Fort Sam, actually.
Okay.
And I'd walk over, and I'd go in, and Georgina would open the door, and, I'd look around, and I knew Joe was there and everything, but I was a little tiny girl, I didn't realize how big he was, But she'd go, you want to go to Mr. Pizza Villa Italian, have some Pepsi Cola, a little ice cream, and nowadays I'd say, yeah, I'd like to have some vino, but, I can't. But anyway. Also, my sister Madeline, she's in Austin. She really wanted to be here also, but...
So you think she's listening?
I think she is.
Well, Madeline, if you're listening, rock and roll to you.
Yeah, text sweet.
It definitely, indeed.
Yes. And I had another friend here, John Garcia. He's working out South Texas, the oil fields. And he said hi to me
Well, that's
with
cool.
a request. Hello, John.
And you got a request, and
Yes.
we probably will be playing that request for you here coming up here rather quickly. And I wanted to share a cool memory of mine. I never got the chance to meet Joe either, but I was a big rock and roll guy during my high school days. And one concert that I remember in particular that was really, that I'll remember for the rest of my life, was a concert with Molly Hatchet, Riot, and AC/DC. And the neat thing about that one is that all three bands, their lead singers have since passed. So you had Danny Joe Brown with Molly Hatchet, you had Guy Speranza with Riot, and that's probably my phone ding-a-linging over here. And then you had obviously Bon Scott with AC/DC, and having them all in the same room at the same time, that was incredible. So Joe was a big concert guy too. So I think what I'm going to do here in just a minute, I'm going to let you introduce the song coming up first, and then I'm going to do a couple of concert intros. But you got to introduce a Def Leppard tune back in the day.
Yes, I had called him on the radio, and I said, hey, Joe, this is your niece, Janice. And, hey, Janice, what's going on? I said, do me a favor. Play Let's Get Rocked by Def Leppard. I love that song. He says, better yet, why don't you introduce it? And then it was after Kiss, and he was on 96 Rock, on 96.1, I believe it was. And he says, well, you do it. Just say, here's my niece, Janice. And I said, hey, Let's Get Rocked by Def Leppard. So let's hear it again.
Okay, let me try it now. Here's Joe Anthony's niece, Janice, going to introduce the next song. Fire away, young lady.
Yes, we're going to hear it now. Let's Get Rocked by Def Leppard.
Rock and roll.
Rock it.
You wanna get rocked?
That's on.
Average, ordinary, everyday kid. vibing with my baby to get her in the mood. She's dialing through my radio and I'm ready to make my move. What she got in rock and roll and it really blew my groove. It was Chopin, Mozart, Beethoven. It makes me wanna scream. Mozart got the violin. That ain't my scene. Well, I'm sorry, girl, here's my confession. Suppose the rock's out of the question. Sunday weekend, up all night, in at the deep end, hang on tight. It won't take a minute, it won't take long. So get on in, come on, come on, come on. Let's get rock. Let's get rock. Let's go all the way. Get it started. Come on, let's get rock. All I wanna do is take a ride into the blue. Every time I wanna get stuck inside my room. Heaven knows I'm sick and tired of dancing with this groove. I feel lucky today. Hey, look at that, man. Do you wanna get rocked? Do you wanna get Won't take a minute, won't take that long. Let's get with it. Come on, everybody. Let's get rockin' on top, baby. Let's get rock. Do you wanna? Get on top, groovy.
Yes, indeed. Def Leppard, introduced mighty finely by niece Janice. You know, he said that, so I just, you know, and it's like a household name for you.
Yeah.
Almost.
Yeah.
So I've been very fortunate to have a lot of snippets of Joe and stuff here on the station. And you know, when people are looking at, you know, when we're posting, hey, you need to listen to this station and that station, and you get so many people on there, they're going like, what, golly, you know, when are we ever going to have a heavy metal station or a rock station like that around? It's going like, it's going to be few and far between. You know, the logistics of it nowadays is that the big boys in the FCC are not granting any licenses and haven't for years because there's no frequencies available, and those that are and aren't used have already been bought up by the high dollar folks. Mm-hmm. And if you just think about this. Okay, so let's just say you're listening to Joe, and you've driven 50 miles, and now it's like, oh, now I'm going to have to change stations. That was the old day, okay? Nowadays, you're going to say, okay, well, now I have to go ahead and get my phone out, and now I have to stream the station.
Right.
Okay? So the thing is, any station that's out there, you got to stream them anyways if they're out of range. I, on the other hand, am never out of range because I don't have that opportunity to be out of range. And you can catch us all the time. All you have to do is anywhere that you can get internet, even on your Bluetooth on your phone, and just about everything is internet-wise. You know, we have the iPhone and the Android app. You can even ask Alexa to play to play it. And I whisper that because she's sitting right behind me, and every time I say her name, she goes off.
Funny.
And I appreciate you, Janice, what you do, even at the coast.
Yeah,
I'm
saying you come in very clear at the beach.
Spreading the news out there. And I appreciate it so much. So those of you that want this back in your life again, I'm just giving my personal opinion that it's here. This is it. The rockvault.us is what we're trying to do. I'm not trying to take Joe Anthony's place. I'm trying to maybe carry on what he left. And
Maybe you'll be the second Godfather of rock, but no one can take his place, of course. But you're doing a good job.
the godson.
Godson.
No. Oh my gosh. So I've got some more interviews and testimonials coming up. Lots of great music, and we're getting some requests on the line here. And I'm trying to get to as many things as I can. If I walk off, you won't. If there's silence, you won't hear the end of the record skipping back and forth until Joe gets back to his seat. You're going to just hear silence, digital silence. But right now, let's do a little bit of Molly Hatchet. So they're going to be the opening act for Riot and AC/DC here coming up. You're rocking and rolling with Schlep on the Rock Vault tribute to Joe Anthony, along with Janice. Thank you for joining me.
You're welcome.
Well, let's kind of kick back and pop a top and get ready for a six-pack of rock and roll.
Sadness, stop the madness. Oh, Must we bury anymore? The hush of the crowd as the horse rode by, a black lace veil hid the tears from her eyes, and we all wept in silence. How many times must good men die? How many times will the children cry? Till we suffer no more sadness. Oh, stop the madness. Oh, stop all the madness.
Yes, indeed, Molly Hatchet right there on the Rock Vault. Good tunes, good music, good rock and roll, my friends. So that was band number one, opening band for this next band right here with Guy Speranza, the Boys in Riot. A little Swords and Tequila, rock and roll. That's what I'm saying, my friends. Rock and roll. Yeah, it's not a battle of the bands tonight. It's just like a short concert with one song each. So you had Molly Hatchet opening up the show for Riot, and now you've got Bon Scott and the boys doing a little bit of what they do best, or what they did best back in that day. And I remember one part of the show where Bon Scott had Angus Young on his shoulders walking around the auditorium while Angus was playing a lead, and Molly Hatchet, one of the guitar players for that band, was on somebody else's shoulders, and they were walking around playing alternate leads with each other. Memories, yes, indeed. It's those are days that you wish you could have back, but you have them as memories. That's what they are. And I know that Janice has had tons of memories that will always be with her. And Joe was just a memory maker. And I'm gonna, after AC/DC here, I'm gonna have another testimonial coming right up. It's just a little after the top of the hour. You're listening to The Rock Vault's tribute to Joe Anthony, the Godfather. The bonus ending. I'm assuming. Oh, got some testimonials coming up here right now. You doing okay? Wetting the sweat,
Yes.
wiping the sweat off your brow. We have this $high air conditioning system in here that just, it's we don't need to spend a whole lot of money on. It's the music they want to listen to. They don't want to hear the air conditioner.
It's being nice and cool pretty soon anyway.
Yeah. All right. This is going back to the early days. Joe Anthony's early work at KESI, and one of his buddies has a little story to tell. Let's give a listen.
Hi, Rock Vault Nation. This is Bob Dallas from the old KESI FM 106, Real Album Rock. My memory of Joe Anthony goes back to the early 80s when I worked with him at KESI. He hired me for the midnight to 6 shift right after his primetime slot. So I was just more than thrilled. Joe was the radio god, the godfather of rock and roll, of heavy metal. And I knew I could learn so much from him. I heard a lot of stories that he shared with me over the years, and I just enjoyed every one of them. But at that time, I was just a 23-year-old young man, practically a kid. And I had an additional part-time job outside of radio. My wife, Cheryl, was also a DJ, Cheryl Gale. Some nights, though, I would sleep for a couple of hours until it was time for me to drive in for my shift. And I would just say probably on more than one occasion, the phone would ring about 12:05, and my wife would sleepily hand me the phone. Remember, there were no pagers, there were no cell phones back then. This is a hardline phone. Just scare the heck out of you, and it's Joe on the other end of the line. Hey, Bob, you scheduled tonight? Knowing full well I was. And you can imagine the panic in my voice, my heart rate, not to mention what was racing through my mind. Was I going to get fired? What was going to go on? And he would just joke about it. And of course, roast me on the air. I'd have to listen to it all the way into the station. I would haul ass to get there. But here's the thing. He never once got angry. He never berated me. He was always cool about everything. And I think that's another reason why people call him the Godfather of rock and roll. And another memory I have of Joe Anthony comes from 1984. I was still the midnight to 6 DJ at KESI FM right after Joe Anthony's shift. And Joe was just always friendly, very personable. He loved to talk, but he would take really a sincere interest in our lives and our family. And one night I mentioned that, hey, my wife and her sisters wanted to throw this big anniversary party for their parents. And Joe just asked kind of out of the blue, well, what are you going to serve them? And I told him, well, we're really thinking spaghetti and meat sauce. It was pretty easy to do and could do that for a lot of people. And at the time, of course, he owned the landmark Italian restaurant Via Italia in San Antonio. It was located on San Pedro Avenue. If you're from the area, it was just a little ways inside Loop 410. And he just asked, all right, so how many guests? And proceeded to write out this detailed grocery list from all the items that I would need to get for him to cook the famous meat sauce for the party. And I was just kind of shocked. I just looked at this long list of 20 items that went into his meat sauce, and are you sure? And sure. He said, yeah, I'll come over and cook the day before. Just, make plans. Let me know what time. And there he was the day before the party, came over to our little apartment on Northeast Parkway, and 2 of his chefs, box full of pots and pans from the restaurant, and they proceeded to chop, dice, and cook all of the wonderful spaghetti sauce. It was a lot of spaghetti sauce. but it was a great hit at the party. And, what a generous thing to do. He spent all afternoon standing over our stove making a special meal for us. He didn't have to do that. This was a side that not many people knew about or knew of Joe, and I always knew him as the radio icon. Everyone knows him as the radio icon, the godfather of heavy metal. But getting to know him as this sweet, generous soul that he was made me admire him even more for who he was outside of radio. He was really a special person. Rest in rock, Joe. One of my favorite taglines, by the way. Kiss FM at the time was heavily formatted and recorded tracks on tape, and that's what they played on the air, but not at KESI. We would still pull vinyl albums from the shelf, pick the side and the track we wanted, and within reason, of course. And our music logs were written on yellow legal pads, of which I am still in a possession of a few still today. Joe was notorious. Joe Anthony was notorious for not actually writing down exactly what he played, but I'm sure that was to keep the bands and the tracks that he wanted to break pretty close to the best. Didn't want any official record. So in the early days, early 80s at KESI, when I first started to take over the graveyard shift, midnight to 6 a.m., I came on right after Joe Anthony, which of course is a thrill in itself, not to mention the perfect setup for a young DJ at the start of his career. My first night, of course, I came in early and was picking out the music for my show, preparing, and Joe asked me if I was going to use my real name on the air. I told him I probably would, since I really hadn't come up with anything I really liked. And he would sometimes bring the newspaper into the studio and pass the time reading in between songs. And that night, I don't know if he was checking the TV listings or what, but he looked at me and said, that TV show, the TV show Dallas, it's still pretty big, and we want you to be big and well received. What about Bob Dallas? I remember saying something about, well, there are a lot of cowboy fans here in San Antonio. Then there really wasn't much more discussion. That was really it. And next thing I know, even though there was still about 40 minutes before I went on the air, Joe opened his mic like he usually did right in the middle of a song. And coming up at midnight, Bob Dallas will be rocking with you for the rest of the night. And just like that, I had my origin story. So even though the Saxon album, The Power and the Glory, which they released around that time, is still near and dear to my heart, I kind of adopted a track from their Strong Arm of the Law LP. It really became my anthem, if you will. So Joe, this is for you. Saxon, Dallas, 1 p.m. on the Rock Vault.
back there, and
that is Dallas, 1 p.m. Saxon. Those heavy metal rockers still out on tour. It's Schlepp with you tonight, along with Janice here in the studio, here on the Rock Vault for Joe Anthony's Salute. Oh, well, let's see. What did I have here? Oh, yeah, I know what I've got. Trying to get to as many requests as I can as well. And John Garcia over in South Texas on them their oil fields, working hard, sweating hard. Wants to hear a little bit of Angel. So, yeah, why not?
to a place where I will stay. Wrap me up and keep me warm. Hide myself off from the storm. Sleep and love will keep my mind at rest. Only now I realize why my parents had to try. Love you all and keep you all my life. Oh, that road is there. Oh, the road is there. Come on back.
Oh, that's one of Joe's favorites there. That's Budgie here on the Rock Vault. You remember Budgie?
Yes.
Playing lots of goodies there. I know you have a little bit of a trip to go on here, so I want to thank you, Janice, so much for stopping by.
Welcome.
And best wishes and health to your family.
Thank you.
They're going through their stuff, and everything will be good. Everything will be cool. And have a safe trip back. Are you heading all the way back tonight, or?
No, I'm not going to the beach tonight. I'm going to stop and set it overnight. I got to pick up my baby, my poodle.
Oh, there you go.
But I'll head back in the morning, for the weekend and stuff. But you're down in Port A.
Okay.
You have a place to stay.
We'll give a visit.
Okay.
So, Janice, thank you so much.
Thank
You're
you.
listening to the tribute to the Godfather, Joe Anthony, here on the Rock Vault. And thanks to all of our listeners so far. We still have more music to come, more testimonials, and right now this one's going out to Ike. Wanted to hear a little bit of Fast Way, so here you go, Fast Way.
Rising like a mountain from below the sea, she's got easy living. Dancing in the evening to the quarter to three, she's got easy living. She's never had a worry, she's never in a hurry. Sweet as like a snake with the greatest of these. Well, ooh. You can go, but you never can tell. I wish your bill could put me in jail tonight. Reaching for the top just like the Torah bell. She's got easy living. Don't know much about it, but you lead her to peace. She's got easy living. She's never had a worry. She's never in a hurry. Slingers like a steak with the greatest of these. Well, ooh, here she comes again. And you know what that spells. You got trouble with a capital T. I wish you luck, but she's gonna be full of history. Of history. Well, you can go, but you never can tell. Wish your bill come and put me in jail
Come see Triumph's brilliant stage production and blazing light shows. The Pride of Canada, Triumph, live in concert tonight at 8 p.m. in the Convention Center Arena. Triumph, with special guests, Legs Diamond. And special added attraction, Morning Star. Tickets on sale at the arena box office.
so many people just want me to tear up the Bee Gees. Isn't that bad? Isn't that bad? I'm gonna spin you around. Goodbye, Bee Gees.
Disco Destruction.
This song is a tragedy. Disco Destruction.
Someone before you didn't take time, teach you to love me. Well, my dear, and I love you. Pump that gas, dig that hole in the ground. Saturday night, up everybody in town. Make my music talk to me. Sing my song so peacefully. Some don't like it, yes, it's true. They can do what they wanna do. Don't be afraid. I don't wanna hurt you. You're not to blame for someone before you. Didn't take time, teach you to love me. Well, my dear, and I love you. Pump that gas, dig that hole in the ground.
Hey, it's Jave the Wave, former host of the Kiss Asylum on 99.5 Kiss back in the mid-'90s. The Godfather, Joe Anthony, one of my first real radio mentors back in 1989 upon graduating from Marshall High School on the north side. Just before the owners of Kiss made that faithful move to flip formats to oldies. And by that time, Joe had moved from rock and roll excess to really just enjoying a Friday night on the radio with a Diet Big Red and strawberry ice cream float. Joe is a great teacher. He taught authenticity. He taught how to read a Dr. Seuss book to a 6-year-old and keep their attention, and shared a great passion for great music. One of the songs I remember Joe loving the most during the 80s and early 90s was from one of his dear friends, Rob Halford and Judas Priest. Every time I crank this one up at home, I think of the legend that was the Godfather, Joe Anthony. Beyond the realms of death from Judas Priest. Long live rock and roll. And long live the memory of the master, Joe Anthony.
Take anymore.
Yes, sir. Beyond the realms of death. That's the Priest, Judas Priest, here on the Rock Vault. And the salute to Joe Anthony, playing all sorts of things that Joe played. And I've got as many requests coming through as I can get to. Still got a few testimonials coming through. And going to be hitting those here. What else do I have? Oh, yeah, this one. This tune here. It was... I could not remember the name of the song to save my life. And going like, okay, so thank goodness you can go to Google and you can say, Google rock song, classic rock song that has yodeling. So I got this. It's that easy, my friends. It's that easy.
27 years ago today, Joe Anthony passed away. He was known as the Godfather of rock and roll in San Antonio. When I was at Somerset High School in the mid-'70s, my friends would tell me about a pizza restaurant in San Antonio called Mr. Pizza, because rock bands would hang out there after concerts because they were friends of the owner, Joe Anthony. There's actually photos with Joe there at the restaurant with Rush, maybe some other groups. I've only seen some pictures of him with the Ramones, Rob Halford, and other bands, too many to name here. So it was pretty awesome meeting and working with him in 1986, because I went to go work for KISS a second time, 99.5 KISS. He wasn't there in 83 when I worked at KISS the very first time, because he and his cohort Lee Roney were starting up KSI, playing rock there. That station was on Martin Luther King Drive on the east side of San Antonio. So when I met Joe, he was working the 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. shift. And that was in 1986 when radio DJs did 4-hour shifts. The KISS studios were on Main Street, and they had 2 walls of windows where the jocks could overlook the downtown. They were on the second floor because the building was only a 2-story floor. One of the funny things that I found really interesting there were listeners used to sit in the parking lot with their radios on so they could see him while he did his show. Some of the funny things that he would do while he was on the air was he would eat and then he would burp. Sounds pretty childish today, but back then it was pretty hilarious and it was fun. I also became friends with T-Bone, Tom Shepke, but before I go venture there, I actually have a picture of myself with Joe at a Christmas party. It was a KISS Christmas party that he had there at his restaurant, the Via Italia, and then that one was on San Pedro. So getting back to Tom Shepke, we were good friends, and when I would be at his house late at night, Joe would call. Joe would be on the air, and he would call and play songs for Tom on the phone, asking what he thought of the group. They would discuss it. Should we add it? What do you think? And some of those groups were probably never really heard of outside of the city or the area that they originated in. And then, of course, San Antonio played them, and the rest was history. Lots of bands came, to San Antonio to do shows, and a lot of it was because of Joe. It was hilarious sometimes because Tom, he's married, and him and his wife would already be asleep. And then Joe would call asking about music, and Tom's wife would be like, hang up the phone, we're already in bed. And I witnessed that sometimes firsthand, because sometimes I used to spend the night at the Shepke's house because I wasn't living in San Antonio at the time. So hanging out with the Godfather was pretty fun. And he had a lot of great stories. Some of the tales would be of when KISS was actually in the penthouse of the Aurora Hotel near Cypress Street and San Pedro, and the elevator would be out, and he'd have to climb the stairs with all his albums, or how he would have to hide his car from the creditors because sometimes he wouldn't get paid. Remember, us radio people did it for the love and not for the money then. We went to concerts together and remotes in his maroon Volvo, even though he played a lot of great, crazy music. Joe was pretty, he was just a standard, everyday guy. He drove a Volvo. I didn't realize how lucky I was until Joe passed away. And I found out about how he and Lee Roney made San Antonio the heavy metal capital of the world. I didn't realize how influenced I was until I went to work in 1994 at the Arrow in Houston, which is a classic hit station. And I asked him, well, why aren't y'all playing Judas Priest or Triumph or Budgie or Saxon? And they would laugh at me like, who are those groups? No one played those groups in Houston. I don't think even KLOL played them at that time. It was a pretty boring music-wise there in that town while I was there. And I met a young guy while I was there in Houston, and he told me that he and his friends had heard of Joe and would drive to San Antonio. They would rent a room, and they would listen to the Godfather on the radio. He influenced a lot of people, and I was one of them. He wasn't working at KISS when he passed away. He was at 96 Rock down the street, although it was his desire to get back on KISS. We miss you, Joe. Those days were fun.
yeah. That's the Oz Man.
Coming live in concert, Canada's Triumph and the phenomenal UFO. A double-barreled rock and roll explosion, Triumph and UFO. Plus, introducing Jackson Highway, Thursday night, May 1st, 7:30 p.m. at San Antonio Convention Center Arena.
Yes, and I went to that concert. Great seats where you could see everything, because the light shows were great. So you wanted to sit a little further back and enjoy it that way. Got some more testimonials coming up. We're going to be on till about 10 tonight. Got some great music still ahead. And speaking of Triumph, why not?
Hey, this is the Iron Man, Brian Knight, formerly of KZEP 104.5 over in San Antonio. I spent a good 5 years over there at the KZEP radio station, and I'm very happy to be part of the Rock Vault and their tribute to the Godfather, Joe Anthony, and what he meant to, not only San Antonio, but to the entire music business in general. I did not have the opportunity to work with with the Godfather, with Joe. I worked with a lot of people that worked with the Godfather, Joe Anthony. I grew up a product of the 60s. I didn't actually grow up in the 60s. And that's the same, I guess, with the Godfather here. I'm more of a product of the Godfather and didn't actually work with him like some of your other guests that you've had here in this tribute. The DJ radio, as we knew it, what I would call the golden age of radio, had actually started to move out. And I brought a lyric here today. I think there's a song that really describes that time period really well, and that is Tom Petty's song, "The Last DJ." He really hit the nail on the head there as far as, the move or the transition into corporate radio. And one of the lyrics from that song is, "As we celebrate mediocrity, all the boys upstairs want to see how much you'll pay for what you used to get for free." That's a really cool line. Let that kind of sink in a little bit, because that's really what happened. And I could see it. The last DJ, the last of the Mohicans, the last of the people who really made radio what it is. The last DJ plays what he wants to play, as Tom Petty would put it. And so those guys during that time period actually got to create the persona that these artists had when they came to Texas. Now, you multiply that times 10, or magnify that times 10 when it comes to the Godfather, Joe Anthony. And so the reason why I started with that is because now I throw myself back in time to when I was, let's say 8, 9 years old, listening to, KISS radio and some of the music that was there, but there was these artists that were just larger than life when you're listening, like Rush would say, the spirit of the radio, when you're listening to this as a kid for the first time, and you're going out at that time and you're purchasing records, vinyl, and you open these big 15-inch record covers up, and the smell of it and everything, and then the way it plays on the turntable with the warm sound that CDs could never duplicate, and that's. That was such a cool thing. Now you take it back and you look at the Godfather, Joe Anthony, and some of these artists that he made big. Rush, of course, being one of them. Same thing with Judas Priest. There was a couple others. Legs Diamond and everything that were actually an LA band. But enjoyed more success in San Antonio than they did in their own hometown. This band, Judas Priest, who, the Godfather has kind of exposed to this area. And little did we know at that time period that we were hearing some of this music before even these large cities of New York and Los Angeles were. So, that's how important the Godfather was to what I consider the golden age of radio, that were new, and everybody was hearing this stuff fresh and for the first time. And he gave them a listen, he gave them a chance, and he made them, even if it was just a little bit more than what they would have been. His impact on radio, he's just a guy that you cannot dismiss. The corporate thing, you put the corporate thing aside, and where we stand now with the radio, you got the Rock Vault right now here, and this is kind of going back to the roots. This is going back to what was good about radio before the corporate told you what songs you needed to play and what artist and in what order and everything like that. It was a man in his mind and saying, hey, I like this song. I think you guys will too. And then all of a sudden it's selling, tons and tons of records. So I certainly appreciate the chance to tribute the Godfather. I'm going to keep praying for Joe and his family, and I hope his legacy lives on. And long live rock and roll. Hey, this is the Iron Man, and in tribute to Joe Anthony, here's the last DJ, Tom Petty, on the Rock Vault.
Well, you can't turn him into a company man. You can't turn him into a whore. And the boys upstairs just don't understand anymore. Well, the top brass don't like him talking so much, and he won't play what they say to play. And he don't want to change what don't need to change. And there goes the last DJ who plays what he wants to play and says what he wants to say. Hey, hey, hey. And there goes your freedom of choice. There goes the last human voice. And there goes the last DJ. Well, some folks say they're gonna hang him so high, 'cause you just can't do what he did. There's some things you just can't put in the minds of those kids. As we celebrate mediocrity, all the boys upstairs wanna see how much you'll pay for what you used to get for free. And there goes the last DJ who plays what he wants to play and says what he wants to say. Hey, hey, hey. And there goes your freedom of choice. And there goes the last human voice. And there goes the last DJ. Down in Mexico, and sometimes it'll kinda come in, and I'll bust a move and remember how it was back then. And there goes the last DJ who plays what he wants to play and says what he wants to say. Hey, hey, hey. And there goes your freedom of choice. There goes the last human voice. And there goes the last DJ.
But uncovering it. Holds electricity. All that 2240.
Aren't you glad you got insomnia, you can't sleep, and you're going to listen to rock and roll tonight as we continue on the Rock Vault?
Okay, so a story about Joe. How many can I get away with telling? One story that sticks to my mind is it was probably mid-70s, 77, probably more like 78. Anyway, there was always this fun little war going on between Lou Roney and Joe Anthony. Not an ego thing, nothing where they were fighting over music. Well, actually, in this case, they were fighting over music. Lou always suspected that Joe was taking albums, brand new albums, before any of the rest of us got to listen to them. And he would sneak them out and then claim his fame to those. How he got those albums, probably from record promoters or, the standard way. But Lou was determined to catch him. And so this one day, I was with Wes Burleson. Wes did the morning show before I did. And Wes and I We were at the KISS station when it was at the World Savings Building. And Wes and I were out in the parking lot, doing nefarious activities. And we're sitting in my car, and we're probably 50 feet away from the building. And we see Lou come out the front door and go around the corner and keep sticking his head around the corner towards the front door, waiting for Joe to come out with a fistful of albums that he suspected he was going to steal. Anyway, we sat there, and of course we're giggling. And lo and behold, the back door behind Lou opens up, and there's Joe. And Joe comes sneaking out with probably 5 dozen albums under his arm and gets to his car, which is also behind Lou, and drives away. At this point, we bust out laughing because Lou proceeded to stand there and watch the front door and never did catch Joe. And I think after that day, Lou felt that Joe was an outstanding guy, was a good music promoter, and wasn't stealing albums. That's the truth. I'm Donnie Meals. Joe, you were a good guy. You always treated me fairly, and it was an honor to work with you.
There you go. Nice testimonial there. The night's not about me and how much I can impress you. No, it's all about Joe and his legacy. So let's continue trying to get as much stuff as I can in before the 10 o'clock hour. Just enjoy. Sit back, man. Kick back and love it.
This is Mario Munoz, formerly at KZEP 104.5 and a one-time host of the KZEP Classic Metal Show. You're listening to the Rock Vault, and just taking a little time to talk about Joe Anthony and being able to be a part of watching Joe become who he was. He never gave up on the music. Even if that meant doing it himself, he left from KISS to KESI to Z-Rock, 96 Rock, and was evident he believed in the music and what he was doing. Breaking bands like Suicidal, Merciful, Sabotage, Pretty Maids, really was a once-in-a-lifetime thing. Got me to where I wanted to be a DJ myself, and I ended up being able to do that. So you're listening to the Rock Vault. Let's do some presents. Let's do rock louder. You're listening to the Rock Vault with Mario Munoz hanging out with you.
What a night to party. Oh, pop that top and have yourselves a great time. This is Joe Anthony in concert, and we're going to rock and roll you tonight. Have a great time.
Hi, this is Richie Rano from the band Stars. I was asked to do a tribute to Joe Anthony, the great Joe Anthony, godfather of hard rock, heavy metal, rock and roll, and all that. And I want to say, you're very lucky, you people in San Antonio, to have had him on the radio. He turned San Antonio and the San Antonio region into the best audience for hard rock and rock music in general in the United States, totally. And I can tell you that's from someone who's played the whole country over and over and over. Cleveland was real good. San Antonio was better. So Joe Anthony was the best, but the crowd is also, the fans are also the best. I have to say it's Star's favorite city to play. Joe Anthony was one great guy. Every time we came through San Antonio, we spent time with him, and he really did love our album Coliseum Rock and play it to death, which was really great, and he will be missed. He was a great man. R.I.P. Joe Anthony.
It's
Coliseum Rock, it's a riot with Schlepp on the Rock Vault, winding down our tribute to the late, great godfather of rock and roll, Joe Anthony. Listen to us here anytime, 24/7. Got great stuff going on, stuff that you've been missing for years. Let's see, any other little notifications here? Hey, I want to thank all my guests, pre-recorded and not so pre-recorded. Janice, for stopping by. I certainly appreciate the visit. Great to have met you. Just the rock and roll is hot, my friends. So let's go out. I think this would probably be most appropriate to close out the show with. I'm going to say my adios, and thank you again so much for joining me on this special night. Also, don't forget, October the 9th is Joe's birthday. Would have been his birthday. So that's coming up, but I thought this would be more appropriate for this evening. You guys take care. Rock on. Enjoy a little Impellitteri somewhere over the rainbow, my friends. Good night.
ain't got no class if you ain't listening to The Rock Vault.